Rochester Police Technician Greg Peck kind of walked us through the video with the prosecution. You're going to see Johnson walking down Hudson Avenue northbound. A cop cruiser is going to pull up in front of him. He's going to turn and run south. You're then going to see Officer Pearson get out of the car and give chase with the police car in hot pursuit. And then you get to that corner where the fatal shooting occurred. He saw what was going on, turned his head to yell to Dana to bring the kids inside. And by the time he had his head back around, both shots had been fired, and he said he felt like something bit him in the leg. Now, the bullet went apparently through up his leg and is still resting between what he described as his buttocks and the base of his penis. As the day has gone on, it's obviously been a little quieter, a little darker. Yesterday the judge had joked around a little bit with the defense attorneys when they were late coming back from lunch. When one of the young men was up on the stand, he joked around with him a little bit as well, but a far more subdued tone today just in general.
I'm having no problem with the trial itself. I can sit in the courtroom, hear the witnesses, see the evidence, even stare down Johnson. But I'm really bothered by the media circus. I understand what their job is, and I'm not offended by any specific entity or reporter. But I'm disgusted at the way my husband's murder has become entertainment.
DA Sandra Dorley has indicated that more police officers will take the stand over the next few days, likely including Officer Mike DePaula, who was Pearson's partner that chased and shot defendant Thomas Johnson III after Pearson was shot. Several eyewitnesses testified to what they observed at the scene over the first 3 days of testimony. Video and audio from the scene have also been played to give jurors a better understanding of what occurred the night Pearson was killed. Dave Thompson, NewsRadio, WHAM1180.
He was a bigger build, darker black, brown hair, buzz cut, and they both immediately was back down on the other side. They looked very dirty, like they've been out there for a while.
He had 39 rounds on him when he returned his duty belt. Officers start out the day with 40 rounds.
Once they spotted him, Officer Pearson went after Johnson after he turned and ran. Officer DePaula said that's when he heard a gunshot and saw Officer Pearson's body collapse. DePaula testified that that's when Johnson pointed a silver handgun at him, bringing the gun to the front of his body, turning again and pointing the gun at DePaula, who testified that's when he shot the suspect. Officer DePaula will return to the stand later today for cross-examination. Sherry Smith, NewsRadio, WHAM 1180.
There are 6 counts up for debate here with the jury, the biggest one being count number 1, that is aggravated murder, and that only occurs during the murder of a police officer. They do have some lesser counts that they can look at. They can look at murder in the second degree, aggravated manslaughter in the second degree, or manslaughter in the second degree, all of which having a different threshold or culpability for them. They just wanted to have counts 4 and 5, 2 of the weapons counts, clarified. Counts 5 and 6 are very, very similar counts, or even titled the same. So really they were looking at those last 3 counts, which are the weapons charges. They just wanted a little bit more clarification on what exactly the law was there. She played several of the videos in a much slower time than real time to give the jurors a better idea of exactly what happened. Just like Mr. Hinman played the scene frame by frame, Sandra Dorley went about halftime through most of the video clips we've already seen, trying to give jurors another look with her perspective what exactly happened. And another big point that she made was this all could have been avoided if Johnson would have just given up to at least Officer DePaula. Some of these other charges could have been avoided. Mr. Hinman said when this all comes down to it, it's 3 vague seconds that come into question. It's a question of when the first shot was fired. He said after the first shot was fired, all bets are off. When Officer DePaula chased Mr. Johnson, he was acting legally and officially as a police officer. But his question is, when was that first shot fired? He showed us video attempting to show the jury that a muzzle flash occurred as the 2 men, Officer Pearson and Johnson, were falling to the ground. So that seems to be his defense. This shot was fired when both men were falling to the ground, and it comes down to whether the acts of Johnson were intentional or reckless, and that will determine the sentencing in his eyes.
In the location as testified to, muzzle to flesh, it required 5 pounds of force to pull that trigger. That is an intentional act.
The ultimate determination is going to be up to them to determine the relative positioning of Mr. Johnson and Officer Pearson and the weapon and the trajectory of the bullet and how that ties in with them falling to the ground.
Mr. DePaula said he saw one man collapse after being shot, and that man's body weight and forward momentum took down Johnson, that indicating that the first shot had been fired while both men were standing up. That's been a point of contention in this case, whether the shot was fired standing up while they were going to the ground or while they were on the ground. She showed us the bullet going through the tissue, through the back of the tongue, then breaking a bone in the neck of Mr. Pearson, then through the epiglottis, which allows you to swallow. Then the bullet went through the back of the esophagus, through another bone, struck an artery, and then was recovered under the left side of the skin in the back of his neck. Eric Freemester's testimony was read again for the jury. They were interested in how the gun worked and how it may have jammed. They really read through his whole testimony. It focused on the logistics of the gun jamming, how it could have jammed, and why it may not have worked after the first two shots were fired.
Pearson's widow, Amy, unveiled the sign during a ceremony this morning. She said she might someday bring her children to that corner.
I think it'll be years before it even becomes, but it's certainly not something that I would be against doing.
Mayor Lovely Warren was among the dignitaries at the ceremony and described what Officer Pearson's death has meant to her.
It just drives you to want to make your community safer, to do everything that you possibly can and work with your community and your police department to make our community safer.
The ceremony was organized by the Badge of Honor Association, which recognizes fallen officers. Todd Halliday, News Radio, WHAM 1180. Paul Gullo, the former deputy mayor and public safety commissioner in Naples, was sitting in the front row during the Thomas Johnson trial Wednesday. News Radio WHAM 1180's Bob Lonsberry reports investigators are checking whether Gullo posed again as an officer that day. Gullo was charged with criminal impersonation after the September funeral. He was allegedly soliciting money on behalf of the Pearson family while posing as a Walcott police officer. He, in fact, had been fired years earlier by Walcott police. That impersonation charge is still pending. Todd Halliday, News Radio, WHAM 1180.
In court today, Judge Moran passed down the sentence in the trial of Thomas Johnson III. Moran issued a sentence of life without the possibility of parole on the top count, aggravated murder of a police officer, a sentence which Moran called wholly inadequate. On the second count, the attempted aggravated murder of Officer Mike DePaula, he was issued a 40 years to life sentence consecutive to the sentence in the first count. And on assault in the second degree, he was issued a 5-year state sentence, also consecutive to the sentence of the top count. Judge Moran was seemingly angered by the statement that Mr. Johnson made in court today, citing the fact that Moran was a police officer in Brighton for many years and attended the funeral of Officer Darrell Pearson. He felt that he was not given a fair trial and asked for a mistrial.
Dave, I understand there was a quote from Mr. Johnson to the effect of, I am guilty, I'm guilty of being a young African-American male. There was no other statement from Johnson?
There was very little remorse from the statement of Johnson. He felt that he said in court that there's, and I quote, no law against running away from the police. He feels that he did nothing wrong in running away from the police, and that he was a man, a black man, walking down the street with a pistol, smoking a Newport. The police knew nothing about him at the time that they went after him, and he knew nothing about those police officers, one of whom he ultimately shot and killed.
Dave, did we hear from Officer Pearson's widow, Amy, during proceedings?
We did hear from Amy Pearson. She said that after today, Mr. Johnson no longer matters to her. To let him matter is to let what happened and what he did affect her, and she feels that she's a better person than having to worry about him. And while she does have to go on without her husband, she wants to carry on the legacy of her husband with her children and think of the times that were good with them and their family.
Dave, so what's next for Mr. Johnson? Off to state prison?
He will be off to prison. They have 30 days to file an appeal, and from what we understand, an appeal will be filed by his attorneys.
The statement read, with today's sentencing, the murderer of Officer Darrell Pearson has been brought to justice. The chief thanked Monroe County DA Sandra Dorley, her staff, the mayor, and their partners in law enforcement in Monroe County. He went on to thank the entire Rochester community for all of their support during the tragedy and for the generous financial donations to help Officer Pearson's family. Finally, the chief thanked the men and women of the police department for their continuing service and for what he called their courage and dedication to this community. Sherry Smith, News Radio WHAM 1180.